When are you gonna start it? Does that mean I'm on? Oh, wait. Yeah, I'm doing a live stream. Yeah, they're tuning in right now. I don't know. Are they tuning in yet, Rhiannon?
Working on it.
Yeah, we're good? You got anybody on there? All right. Hello, everybody. I'm Brian Dish from the Visitor Services Department here at Columbia State Historic Park. Well, once again, we're bringing Columbia to you. And once again, I want to thank everybody that's helped do their part to help flattening the curve. You know, we can see the light at the end of the tunnel, and if we keep up with our social distancing, washing our hands, and only going out for essentials, we're gonna beat this thing and keep California healthy. So today we're gonna talk about the facts and folklore of the express businesses in Columbia. Specifically the Wells Fargo building, which is what I like to call our flagship building because it's one of the most talked about and one of the most iconic buildings that we have here. You see them in ads, you see them on the news, but we're gonna go into that today. But before that, I wanted to address something. We had a viewer that sent us a little note during the last live stream tour, and it says this: "Hello, I was curious about the history of Columbia and the story of Cinco de Mayo. I heard it was the first place to be celebrated. Maybe that could be discussed on the next virtual tour. Thank you." Well, that's a great question, and it is part of our story. There's a really cool story behind it. So the story is that Columbia was the very first place that Cinco de Mayo was celebrated in California. Now, the history is this, is that after the Battle of Puebla, when the Mexican beat the French, the news of that battle being over took a couple weeks to reach California. And by the time that came up to the mines and reached Columbia, when the Mexican miners here in the area read the news, they were so excited that they spontaneously fired off their guns, made impromptu speeches, sang patriotic songs. They celebrated for this battle because, you know, they knew about it and they were so happy that they won. So Cinco de Mayo was celebrated here, but it took a few weeks. So it didn't happen until May 27th of 1862. So we did have a very large Cinco de Mayo celebration, but it was on May 27th. Was it the first Cinco de Mayo celebration to happen in California? That might be a little hard to tell because yes, Columbia had a very, very large Hispanic population. Remember, Sonora, the town of Sonora, is just 5 miles away, and that was named after the town of Sonora in Mexico. So we had a very large Mexican population, but so did San Andreas. So did a lot of other camps around there. To say it was the first, we like to think so, but I also do know that they celebrated the winning of this battle in many different places. But great question, and if you're constantly curious about anything, please post them. We'll see if we can answer it for you, because there's so much history all around the gold fields of California. Okay, so today we're talking about the express businesses, the facts and folklore of the express businesses of the California Gold Rush, specifically Wells Fargo. So when I first started learning about the express businesses, I was like, okay, so what's an express? You've heard of FedEx, Federal Express, right? FedEx. You might have an American Express credit card in your pocket. Express, the word's been around. So I got out my handy dandy dictionary, and we like to look up the word express. Express, operating at high speed, denoting a service in which letters or packages are delivered by a special service to ensure speed or security. Delivering packages with speed and security. That's what an express business is. One of the very first express men, his name was Adams, and he ran the Adams Express, was one of the first ones to operate in the gold fields or in the gold country. And how this happened was, the folklore is that Adams came around the horn during the gold rush to mine. He was not interested in being an expressman at all. He probably wasn't even concerned about it at the time. He makes his way all the way up into the mines. Okay, so he goes, if you look on our map, he goes from San Francisco all the way over to the port of Stockton, and then he makes his way all the way to Columbia in the southern mines here, right in between the Stanislaus and the Tuolumne River. Well, Adams is here and he's mining, and he hates it. He says, "This is not for me. I am not strong enough. I don't like digging in the dirt all day. It's hot. The water's cold. It's like, this really isn't working out, and plus I'm not getting any money. I'm going back to San Francisco." And everybody in the mines are like, "Where are you going?" And he's like, "San Francisco." And then they're like, "Can you get my mail?" And he's like, "What?" He's like, "I'll give you $1 if you pick up my mail and bring it back." And another guy says, "I'll give you another $1. "Oh yeah, I'll give you $1. Soon Adams had a list of about 50 guys that were gonna gave him $1 to go to San Francisco, and then if he went and got the mail from the post office there and successfully returned it to the person, they would give him 1 ounce of gold or $12 in gold. All of a sudden, Adams, before he knew it, was an expressman, and the express business started. Remember, moving goods And services, or getting your mail from here all the way to here, was a big deal. And there were companies out there that did it. So Rhiannon, if you can follow me, we're gonna take a little walk, okay? We're gonna take a little walk up into town. Now, I like to imagine this. It's like, we're working in the mines all day, right? The mines are all around the basin of Columbia. Maybe a mile away, could be 2 miles away, but it was right around here. And you got your gold. What are you gonna do with it after you got your gold? Well, you're gonna need to exchange it. You don't wanna just walk around with a bunch of gold dust, right? Could you imagine having $500 of gold sitting in your tent or underneath your bunk while you're working in a little stream? You know, that's not very secure. Somebody might try to lift it from you. So you need a place to put it, or you need to exchange it for gold coin. The express office is where you could do that at. Also, I want you to kind of pan over here as we're walking up this really cool boardwalk. So as I make Rhiannon trip on there, you're gonna notice all these rocks. Now, this is a great feature of Columbia. It really kind of tells a story, which these are limestone rocks. And if you could imagine, all this was underground before the gold rush happened. When all the miners came in, there was so much gold in this basin that they dug up just about every corner of the place to try to get that gold-bearing dirt. And these rocks are kind of a, you know, symbolizing that. You can imagine that the dirt was all around it and they just all got scraped clean. I always tell the fourth graders or the kids, you know, and some people, if you're interested, you know, you can get down in there. You might even be able to make out maybe a pickaxe marks or a strike from a shovel from when the mining operations are happening. But when you make your way up here, or if you're traveling through the mining districts of California, you'll see barren rocks like this, and quite often, it's because of the mining operation. We're almost into town, everybody. We're gonna keep on going. All right, so this is our first glimpse of our very famous building. It's our Wells Fargo Express building. When you came into town, this was probably one of the first places you're gonna go, because remember, you're in the mines working. Now you have gold, so at the end of the week, you need to come into town, exchange your gold, go to the store, resupply for the next week, maybe get a little entertainment, want to get some newspapers, and maybe you even have a letter. Remember, one of the most important things for the miners that came to California is, yeah, they wanted the gold, but they wanted to hear from home. They wanted to know the news that was happening at home. They wanted to make sure their girlfriends, their wives, their families, their moms, everybody's happy and healthy. And they wanted to let their families know that they were doing okay. So mail was important. And the U.S. Postal Service was still kind of figuring out how to operate way out here in California. The express companies knew that, so the express companies, they decided that serving the mail or getting mail to the people in the mines was going to be their #1 important thing to do. Let's keep on walking in here. Well, we made it into town, everybody. Welcome to Columbia. Here's our building. This is the Wells Fargo and Company Express. This was where you could get your mail, you could exchange your gold, and you know, you could deposit it. We'll go on in just a second, but remember, this building was built in 1858 by our very first express agent. His name was William Dagner. I'll show you a picture of him in a minute. But the building was built after the major fire of '57. Wells Fargo's been in Columbia way before 1858. They were in little wood buildings all around town, like in the American Hotel and around the corner over here. But after the fires kind of burned him out, Mr. Dagner, he decided he's going to build a more permanent structure out of brick, and this is where this building has been ever since. So since 1858, this building has been here, and you can imagine miners just lining up all up and down the street to come into the express office. It's pretty cool, right? So we're going to go inside, and before we go inside, I want you to notice that there's really big doors, right? Remember what the big doors are for? The big doors are for to let in as much light as you can for as long as you can, because there isn't electricity and you don't want to light your oil lamps. And there's big iron doors. Iron doors were for the fire protection, right? Well, let's take a look. So I open up these iron doors quite often in town. I still got all my fingers, but you still got to be careful. You want to take it off. Come on in. Welcome to Wells Fargo, everybody. One of the original pieces of the building right here, this big old desk here. The original scales are actually in the museum. So when we open up the visitor center back up, if you want to see the original scales, they are there, which is totally cool. But remember, you would come into Wells Fargo to check your mail. So it's like, hey, Ron, do we have any mail for you today? You want to know if Grandma's doing okay in St. Louis, Missouri. And they would go through, pull the mail out, see if you have one, and here's your letter. The price to send a letter from a Wells Fargo Express or usually an Adams & Company Express, we're all kind of very similar around there for competitiveness, but it usually costs about a cent or so per half ounce of a letter. So if your letter weighed less than a cent, you could send it down over there. But you could charge upwards as much as $1 to send it from the East Coast all the way to California. All depended on expressmen, all depended on the prices. Another really thing for everybody to know that Wells Fargo itself has a great corporate historian. They have museums. They have all sorts of information. So even though we are talking about the building here, their history goes very far back, and there's very knowledgeable people all about it. So if you aren't interested about it, you can just Google Wells Fargo, get onto their web pages, and you can find plethoras of great information. I found great books and lots of great resources about Wells Fargo, their frontier, the express businesses, their iconic stagecoaches, just about everything. In this building, William Dagner was our first express agent, right? This is a picture of him. Show you on it. There he is, Mr. Dagner. How's everybody doing? I'm doing great. Well, welcome to Wells Fargo. All right. He was one of the most trustworthy men in town. You'll see his name in a lot of the Columbia newspapers. He donated to a lot of causes. He helped, build up our fire department. He was a very notable man, and he worked here for a number of years, but he was our very first Wells Fargo agent. He actually lived, when he had this building built, he made it so where the back room here was their house. So they actually lived here. There's 2 bedrooms upstairs. There's a parlor and a sitting room here in the back. And the kitchen was actually attached to the building, but it was a wood structure, and that wood structure is no longer with us. It didn't really survive to the thing. So, back to what we were trying to do, right? So we're trying to take our gold in. Now, Wells Fargo and all the other express businesses would buy your gold dust at the price of gold. So usually about $12 to $16 an ounce. So let's say we have a whole bunch of gold from our claim. We're going to come into town. Now, you could use gold as currency. A lot of people like to do that. They would say, all right, we're going to, a couple of nuggets here, and you want to change this into coin, right? So after the U.S. Mint was put into service in San Francisco, it made it a lot easier for people to get coins for their gold dust. So people would sell their gold dust to an express business, and they would exchange that for coin. You would usually, by putting it on a scale, so any of my 4th graders out there that are curious about how this works, is they would weigh it out for you. So we'd have a bunch of gold from our mines, right? We hand it over. It looked like it was pretty pure gold. They didn't need to essay it, so this is like good stuff. And then you would put counterweights on a scale, which are these. This weighs 2 ounces, and this is about an ounce. And when they would even out, then this would weigh as much as that. So let's say you can actually kind of move these scales like over here and really get it balanced out. And they would say, okay, this is about 3 ounces of gold. And I'd be like, great, and what would you like to do with it? Would you like to deposit it here in the safe? Do you want to draft, or would you like cash? So you could say, okay, I'll take 3 ounces. We're $12 an ounce today, so that's what, 36 bucks? So I can get $36 in gold coin. Or you could say, I don't want the gold coin, I want to deposit it in your bank, or in your safe. So they'd be like, okay, that's great. Let's come back over here. This is a pretty neat part of the building. So obviously we have our wood burning stove because it does get cold here. We have our oil lamps, you got our working desk. This safe is a Holman and Ferdinand safe made from Boston. Now, when the expressmen started realizing that the need to secure money became super important, I mean, you got $500 in gold, are you just going to put it underneath your pillow in your tent and then walk to town hoping that nobody takes it? Well, a lot of robberies and things happened during the time because people were going into little miner shacks that were unmanned and taking the gold out. So it caused a lot of problems. So they realized having a safe was a great way to do it, and they can make some money doing it. Wells Fargo had this safe. I found, as I was going through newspapers, remember, if you're constantly curious about everything, like me, and you want to know the history of stuff, look up the old newspapers. Some of the stuff might be a little blown out of proportion that they wrote back in the day, but you really get an idea of what life was like. This is an article from a newspaper that happened in 1854, and it's announcing that Wells Fargo and Company have just received one of the Holman and Ferdinand's fire and theft-proof safe, right? Holman and Ferdinand, that's the safe. We found the article when they got it, from 1854. Isn't that cool? And also, this is also pretty neat, it also says, if the miners would deposit their coin and dust in our banking houses instead of keeping it in their cabins and bunks, we would have fewer robberies to record. So they guilt-tripped you and putting the money over here. And it worked. A lot of people did put it. How it worked was you would come to Wells Fargo and you'd say, I'd like to make a general deposit. They said, okay, great. They take your money, they would give you a receipt for how much money you put in the deposit, and then they would charge you about a half a cent a month to keep the money in the safe. And but the company could use your money, just like banks do. Or you could have a special deposit, which is they will take your money, give you a receipt, put it in the safe, and they charge you about 1 cent a month, but they wouldn't use your money. So there's a general deposit and a special deposit. Again, there's lots more information about this online, about the whole how the express business has turned into the banking industry. It was great. The other thing, very important, that the express companies did was if you wanted to send your money back home, me and Rhiannon, we wanted to send our money back to Grandma in St. Louis, Missouri, right? We come into a Wells Fargo, we say we have $36 in gold, we would like to send this to Missouri, to my grandmother. Or basically how it worked was, you would get a bank note, and you would take that note, and you could mail it to Grandma, or send it on a ship, or get it back over to St. Louis. Grandma gets the letter, or the bank note, or the draft, and takes it into their local Wells Fargo, because remember, Wells Fargos were everywhere. The express businesses were everywhere. The Wells Fargo was one of the largest. Anyway, they would go to the local Wells Fargo, they would take in the draft, and they would say, okay, this is a good draft for $36, and then pay Grandma the $36. So they just basically efficiently took the money from California and put it in Missouri. That's how it worked. Pretty wild, right? Now, another cool thing is that express businesses ship things, okay? You needed something moved, or if you had freight from San Francisco and you needed to get it up to Columbia, or let's say we had something from Columbia, we needed to move to Sonora or down the line to San Andreas or somewhere. You could come into a Wells Fargo and you would put it on some of their freights that would come out, right? Well, how that worked was they charged you by weight. So you discuss a price. There was a price like 20 cents a pound. Usually it was about like 20 or 10 cents a pound. It all kind of depended on the stuff. But let's say we had a big bag of beans. Okay. Now this is it's called a platform scale, or I used to call them hog scales, a floor scale. It's a scale that can weigh 800 pounds, 900 pounds worth of stuff. The way it works is that you put whatever you're going to weigh on this scale, and you would take this lever, which is going to true up the scale. So I'm going to pull the scale out here, pull this down, and all of a sudden this little bar is going to move up and down. This is where your numbers are, and you would just slide it, just like the old doctor scale, exact same principle. You just slide it until this bar starts to true itself and be even. So right now it looks like I have about 45 pounds worth of beans on here that I'm going to send. And if it's 10 cents a pound to ship, what's that, $4.50 to move it on out the door? That's how the express business works. Seems simple, but it was very intricate. You had a lot of names, a lot of stuff moving, and these express companies were amazing on how they did it. Now, another interesting thing, people always ask me, what about the robberies? What about the stagecoach robberies? This was the Wild West. Yes, there were lots of stagecoach robberies. They called them highwaymen. It did happen. Wells Fargo was one of the first companies that had kind of a slogan, which was security and reliability, which means that they're going to do what they can, or they're going to guard your money as best they can when it is en route from a town to the next town. Wells Fargo was the first people really to coin the phrase shotgun messenger. You heard about riding shotgun, right? Saying, shotgun, I'm going to ride on this side of the car. Well, shotgun messengers were Wells Fargo's basically security system on a stagecoach. You had the driver, and then right next to him was an armed guy holding the shotgun, making sure nobody's out there trying to stop the stage. Now, it worked, but some robberies actually did happen where people made off with the money. Now, if we had our $36 on a stagecoach heading down to Stockton, and somebody took it out of one of the strong boxes, or they got the better of the expressmen, then Wells Fargo would actually pay you that money back. They gave you the money back. It was pretty much insured. And the figures are, it was like over the course of so many years, Wells Fargo actually paid out more money in their securities and crime-solving division than they made profit. But that's what kind of backed them into the reliability department, and they thought it was well worth it. But they would pay you your money back. This is a replica of one of their green boxes. We have one of the real deals inside our museum along with the scales. But this is a little replica that we have. It's made of like ponderosa pine with like oak and iron, really heavy duty locks. This one was specifically made to carry gold. That's why it has these really big iron wings on it. Some of the older ones you'll see actually have leather strap handles on it. But these things were tough. They were the symbol of keeping secure money when it's going to be moving. Because remember, during the time, $87 million of gold came out of this town alone, and that gold had to get shipped along a route all the way down to San Francisco or wherever it was going. So it was big business to try to keep that money safe. And these boxes were what did it. I read lots of articles about some expressmen or agents would actually, they would bolt these things to the stagecoach itself. So if somebody did stop the stage and get the horses away from get the horses and the people out of the thing, and they would go to town trying to get one of these out, they usually have to pry them out or bang them out with a hammer. So it's a pretty big deal to try to get one of these out of the stagecoach. If something did happen to where the stagecoach was robbed, what usually happened was then the stagecoach drivers would go back to the nearest local authorities and they'd put out a reward for the arrest and conviction of robbery. This is, I have one here from William Dagner himself here. This is actually a pretty heavy duty reward. Typical rewards for bringing people to justice was about $250, and then they would also give you like 1/4 of the treasure recovered. So Wells Fargo not only had their own security division, their own basically detectives, they would also get the people of the town involved by saying, hey, we'll pay you money if you find out who robbed that stage from, you know, out of Milton, and we're going to pay you for it. And that really worked to their advantage, and it really helped stop or curb most of the highway robberies that were happening during the gold rush at the time, because, you know, it was just something that they basically had to deal with. That was that. Well, real quick before we're done, I want to talk about how many Wells Fargos or express businesses there were. These are just little, you know, notes that we have over here, but you know, Wells Fargo companies were everywhere. They were all over the place. They were Auburn, Amador City. They were Jackson. They were Iowa Hill. Just about every town has one. You could find them, and if you're, you know, maybe if you don't know if there was one in your town, you could look it up, because you know, Sonora had one. San Andreas, there was one. They're still around, which is a pretty amazing thing. But this just goes to show on how big of an operation it was. I mean, because they had them in Panama. The very first year they came to San Francisco in 1852, they also put a Wells Fargo down by the Isthmus, because that was one of the main routes that the people were taking to get to California. So they really took a minute and didn't just jump in. They really kind of contemplated how they're going to make this operation work, and it worked for many, many years. This Wells Fargo was in operation here in Columbia until about 1914, when the gold rush was over and finally they didn't really need to use it anymore. So it kind of turned into a small little museum with people still living here and explaining the significance of the town in Wells Fargo. It's kind of like almost like our little mini visitor center around the turn of the century, which is pretty neat. And it's still here today. And when all this is said and done, and we can finally get visitors back into the park, I want you to come here and put your hand on this stuff, because it's all, you know, very, very real, and it's all still here for everybody to enjoy. Everybody, I hope you had fun with me today. I had a lot of fun with you. Thanks for tuning in. I hope you enjoy these little series of the facts and folklores of the California Gold Rush history in Columbia. If you do have any questions about anything that we said, go ahead and post them. We'll see if we can get them answered for you. And I want to thank you very much for still doing your part to help flatten that curve. We can see the light at the end of the tunnel. We will have a return to normalcy soon. It'll be here. We just got to wait for it, all right? From the Visitor Services Department here at Columbia State Historic Park, I'm Ryan Dish, along with Rhiannon, and thank you very much for tuning in. I'll see you next time. I'm going to walk off camera now, and I might walk off camera this way. Or wait, we should probably try that. That work? No, it doesn't work. That's good. All right.